Why Edge didn't end the Undertaker's streak, but Brock Lesnar did. For years, WWE fans have asked the same question. If the Undertaker's WrestleMania streak was eventually going to end, then why didn't Edge do it? And why did WWE choose Brock Lesnar instead? What makes this story even more interesting is that Edge actually had the opportunity. At WrestleMania 24, Edge was already a huge WWE superstar, a multiple-time world champion, and he was facing The Undertaker with the legendary streak sitting at 15-0. Behind the scenes, the idea of Edge ending the streak was reportedly discussed, but Edge himself didn't want to do it, and his reasoning was actually pretty interesting. Edge didn't think he needed the streak. When Edge later talked about the possibility, he explained that he was already an established main event star. He was going into WrestleMania 24 as one of WWE's biggest names, so beating The Undertaker wouldn't really change his position in the company. In Edge's own words, he basically felt that if he was already a made man, then why take away one of WrestleMania's biggest attractions just to give him another accomplishment? At that point, The Undertaker's undefeated WrestleMania record had become bigger than just another statistic. Fans weren't simply watching Undertaker's matches to see who would win. They were watching because they wanted to know whether the streak would survive another WrestleMania. And Edge understood that. He believed the streak should be saved for someone who could genuinely benefit from that kind of career-changing victory. So at WrestleMania 24, Edge didn't break the streak. Instead, Undertaker defeated him and moved to 16-0. And then the streak kept growing. 16-0 became 17-0, then 18-0, 19-0, 20-0, and eventually, Undertaker walked into WrestleMania 30 with an unbelievable 21-0 record. At that point, the question wasn't whether the streak was important. It had become one of the biggest attractions in WWE. So why Brock Lesnar? This is where Brock Lesnar enters the story. When WWE finally decided that the streak was going to end, they needed somebody who could make that moment feel believable. And Brock Lesnar was almost the perfect choice from a character perspective. Think about who Brock was in 2014. He wasn't just another WWE superstar. He was the Beast. He had already become a former WWE champion. He had returned to WWE after his UFC career, and he had the legitimate combat sports background that made him feel different from almost everyone else on the roster. Brock had also become UFC heavyweight champion, so WWE could present him as someone who wasn't just a professional wrestler playing the role of a monster. Fans knew Brock could actually fight. That gave WWE a huge advantage. If someone was going to walk into WrestleMania and beat The Undertaker, Brock Lesnar was one of the few people WWE could put in that position without making the audience immediately think, there's no way this guy should beat him. And that's exactly what happened at WrestleMania 30. Going into the match, almost everyone expected Undertaker to win. Why wouldn't they? He was 21-0 at WrestleMania. He had already beaten Shawn Michaels twice. He had survived battles with Triple H. He had defeated some of the biggest stars WWE had ever produced. So Brock had an almost impossible job. He wasn't just trying to defeat Undertaker. He was trying to defeat something that WWE had spent more than 2 decades building. The match itself was brutal. Brock kept attacking Undertaker and refusing to back down, while Undertaker fought through Brock's power and kept trying to survive. Eventually, Brock hit Undertaker with another F5. The referee counted, and for a few seconds, the entire stadium didn't even know how to react. The Undertaker had lost. The streak was over at 21-1. WWE itself later described the moment as one that rewrote WrestleMania history. But here's the crazy part. Even Brock Lesnar has said that ending the streak wasn't his decision. In a 2026 interview, Brock explained that the call came from Vince McMahon, and he viewed wrestling as a business where eventually it was his turn to carry the baton. Undertaker has also explained that the decision wasn't really his to make. So this wasn't Brock walking into Vince McMahon's office and saying, I'm ending the streak. It was WWE making a creative decision about what they wanted to do with one of the most protected records in company history. And that's where the debate gets interesting. Was Brock actually the right choice? Even Edge doesn't think so. Years later, Edge admitted that he still believes Brock didn't necessarily need the victory. Brock was already an established superstar, a former world champion, and a legitimate UFC heavyweight champion. Edge's argument was that WWE could have given the victory to a younger star who was about to become the company's next major workhorse. And when you hear that, it's easy to understand why some fans still believe Roman Reigns should have been the one. Roman was becoming WWE's next franchise player, and defeating Undertaker at WrestleMania could have been an enormous passing of the torch moment. But WWE went in a completely different direction. They chose Brock Lesnar, and whether you love the decision or hate it, there's one thing you can't deny. Nobody forgot it. Edge versus Brock. Two completely different situations. The biggest difference between Edge and Brock is actually the timing. When Edge was offered the possibility of ending the streak, he was already one of WWE's top stars. He didn't believe the victory would add enough to his career to justify destroying something that had become such a massive part of WrestleMania. Brock's situation was different because by 2014, WWE was building him as an attraction unlike anyone else. He wasn't wrestling every week. He wasn't constantly chasing championships. Brock would disappear, return, and immediately feel like the biggest threat in the building. That made him a perfect person to create a once-in-a-lifetime WrestleMania moment, and WWE got exactly that. To this day, people still remember where they were when Brock pinned Undertaker. It was one of those moments where the reaction itself became part of WWE history, the real reason Edge didn't do it. So, if you simplify the entire story, Edge didn't refuse because he was afraid of the responsibility or because WWE didn't trust him. Quite the opposite. Edge understood how valuable the streak had become. He believed that if it ever had to end, the victory should be used to elevate someone who truly needed it. And that's why he personally turned down the idea. Brock, on the other hand, accepted the role WWE gave him, and Vince McMahon ultimately made the call. The result was one of the biggest shocks in WrestleMania history. Edge could have been the man who ended The Undertaker's legendary streak at WrestleMania 24, but he said no. The streak ending will always be one of the most controversial and unforgettable decisions in WWE history.